sur la piscine. La rascasse. La chicane.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Tim McGrain, and I'm the CEO of M1 Concourse. And on behalf of our entire team here, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Before we get started with the formal part of this morning, I'll just share with you some information about some upcoming events and activities we have going on here. So our next speaker series is the first weekend in October, and we have Jay Ward. Jay is the creative director at Pixar Studios. And because of his lifelong passion and knowledge of cars, he's generally considered the guardian of the Cars franchise at Pixar. So Jay's going to come and talk to us about the world of Pixar, the Cars series, and I think there's some new stuff coming down that we may get an insight of. And that'll be our last speaker series of the year. Coming up the first weekend in October is our American Speed Festival, September 29th through October 2nd. It is a 4-day event. The first day, the Thursday, is actually a driving tour. We leave here in the morning. We've got a route planned through the countryside and end up with a lunch and a stop at the Stolz Museum, and then they come back here for an evening event. Friday and Saturday are 2 days of on-track activity. We don't do wheel-to-wheel racing here because we're classified as a high-performance driving experience track, but what we have is we have a series of classes where the cars go out and either do timed runs or demonstration runs. This year we're celebrating 60 years of Shelby American, so we've got a Cobra class, a Shelby class. We've got the vintage Indy cars coming here. We've got about 16 fabulous vintage Indy cars. We're doing a 75 years of Ferrari, so we've got a Ferrari class and some others. On the Sunday, we don't do on track. We have what we call Speed and Style Expo. So it's a big car show. The competitive cars will be a part of the show, plus we've invited other cars. And then inside the hall here, we're going to have a new automotive art expo. On Saturday and Sunday, during the day, we're going to have a master of motorsports for the weekend is Peter Brock. For those of you who aren't familiar, Peter was the designer of the Shelby Daytona Coupe, which they won the World Championship with. He has got a phenomenal career, and Peter's going to come here for the entire weekend. But on the Saturday and the Sunday, we're going to do a sort of a fireside chat with David Hobbs. So on the Saturday, they'll be talking about Peter's career with Shelby, both in the early years and latter years. And then on the Sunday, he's going to be talking about his early years at GM. When he was there, he started at GM at 19, and the Corvette XP Stingray. General Motors have very kindly lent us that, so that's going to be here. And then he's going to talk about his years at BRE, Brock Racing Enterprises, where he took the Datsuns and won the Trans Am Championships for a couple of years. And that will round out, our year here. So we have a brand new M1 Concourse car club that we're just launching. And there'll be information on our website, and that'll be available. So next year, as we go into the events, there'll be benefits for club members. I think one of the benefits will probably be most appealing is we're going to have designated club parking space in the arena for club members. And there's a whole host of other activities. So, the 2002 book, Fast Women, The Drivers Who Changed the Face of Motor Racing, is about women who raced during the pioneering days of motorsports. The foreword for the book was written by Sir Stirling Moss, arguably the greatest all-round driver of all time. Stirling's mother, Eileen, competed in trials and rallies, and his brilliant younger sister, Pat, was an accomplished and championship-winning rally driver. Ever since men began racing motor cars, women have wanted to do the same. But to do so, they had to fight prejudice and bias in a sport dominated by men, and claims such as, would they be able to handle powerful cars at speed? In 1901, one of France's pioneering ladies, the fiercely competitive Camille Dugast, entered the 687-mile Paris to Berlin race in a 20-horsepower Panhard. At half the horsepower of the other 122 competitors, she was made to start last. Even so, she finished a remarkable 33rd. 1935, at 4 foot 10 inches tall, the diminutive Kay Petrie became a star at the legendary Brooklands track when she lapped the notoriously bumpy outer circuit at nearly 135 miles an hour in a massive 10.5-liter Delage. Over the 32 years that Brooklands was operational, only 9 drivers had ever exceeded speeds over 135 miles an hour on that demanding circuit. Whether it is Marie-Therese de Filippi, the first woman to race in Formula One in 1958 and 1959, participating in 5 World Championship Grand Prix races, driving a Maserati 250F. Denise McCluggage in the 1950s and 60s, who earned the respect of her male counterparts, competing against the very best of the day in international sports car races. Leila Lombardi, who in the 1970s competed in Formula One and to date is the only female driver to score World Championship points. Janet Guthrie in the 1970s was the first woman to race at Indy and also a NASCAR Super Speedway event. Shirley Muldowney in the 70s and the 80s, who not only won the NHRA title, but became the very first person ever to claim drag racing's most prestigious title 3 times in a row. Michelle Mouton, who in the 1980s was the first female to win a major international rally championship driving one of the Group P supercars, the quickest and most sophisticated rally cars ever built. These were all fast women, all breaking barriers, not only of the speed type. Our speaker today fits that description, fast lady. Lyn St. James started her racing career in 1974 at an SCCA event at the Moroso Raceway in Palm Beach, Florida. But she left the event with a sinking feeling, something that we will hear about this morning. Lyn was undaunted and determined. She would go on to win back-to-back SCCA Florida Regional Championships in 76 and 77. She finished second in the IMSA American Challenge and won its Top Woman Drivers Award. In 1985, Lyn was the first woman to exceed 200 miles an hour on an oval course when she drove the Ford Mustang prototype at Alabama's Talladega Super Speedway to an average speed of over 204 miles an hour. On October the 11th in 1986, again at Talladega Super Speedway, driving the Bill Elliott Racing prepared new Ford Thunderbird, a car in which she had no previous experience, she set the woman's closed course record of 212.76 miles an hour, breaking 21 national and international records. Over a 20-year career, Lyn has held 31 national and international closed circuit records. Lyn is 2-time competitor of the most prestigious sports car race in the world, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. This was recognized at the recent Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, when she joined 9-time winner Tom Christensen, 6-time winner Jackie Ickx, 4-time winner Henri Pescarolo, along with Jochen Mass and Justin Bell, celebrating the centenary of the legendary French Classic. She raced at the 12 Hours of Sebring 9 times, winning the GTO class in 1990, and was a 2-time winner of the GTO class at the 24 Hours of Daytona. Lyn raced in 53 Trans Am races with 7 top 5 finishes. She was even more successful in 62 IMSA GT events, amassing a record 6 wins, 17 top 5 finishes, and 37 top 10 finishes. Her 1985 IMSA GT victory at Watkins Glen remains the only time a woman has scored a victory in that series, driving solo and nearly lapping the entire field. She is a 7-time starter at the Indianapolis 500 and one of only 9 women to have qualified for the Indy 500. In 1982, became the first woman to win the Indianapolis 500 Rookie of the Year award. In 1994, driving for Dick Simon Racing, she qualified on the outside of row 2, causing quite a stir by out-qualifying the row behind her, which comprised of Formula One world champions Nigel Mansell and Mario Andretti, the 1969 500 winner, and Arie Luyendyk, the 1990 Indy 500 winner. In 1995, while qualifying for the Indy 500 race, Lyn again set the women's closed course speed record of 225.72 miles an hour. In 2000, at the age of 53, she was the oldest driver in the Indianapolis 500 starting grid. That year, during qualifying, she also watched as Sarah Fisher qualified for the race, and at age 19 would be the youngest driver to compete in the Indy 500. Previously in 1994, Lyn had established the Woman in the Winner's Circle Foundation to help launch women into motor racing. A young participant of her program at age 15 had been Sarah Fisher. 2001, Ford Motor Company celebrated 100 years of Ford racing and joined Edsel Ford II at the celebrations was an all-star lineup of Ford Motor Company greats that included George Foreman, Sir Jackie Stewart, Dan Gurney, Ned Jarrett, Parnelli Jones, Carroll Shelby, and also in that lineup was Lyn St. James, a testament to her racing credentials. Named by Sports Illustrated magazine as one of the top 100 female athletes of the century, and by Automotive News as one of the top 100 women in the automotive industry, she has been cited for accomplishments in and out of race cars by numerous publications and institutions. 2021, Lyn was the honoree at the Amelia Island Concourse, where she also received the Spirit of Ford Award, Ford Motor Company's highest honor in auto racing, recognizing lifetime achievement and the contribution to the industry on and off the racetrack, becoming only the 27th recipient of that award. She is inducted into the Sports Car America Hall of Fame, the Sebring Hall of Fame, and earlier this year, here in Detroit, into the Automotive Hall of Fame. She serves on the FIA Women in Motorsports Commission, the IndyCar's Appeal Council, and is on the ACUS board. A few years ago at the Goodwood Revival, the theme of the event was Dream Teams. There was a panel discussion with some legendary drivers, Sterling Moss, Alan de Cadenet, Derek Bell, Jochen Mass, Jackie Oliver, and they were each asked what was their dream team. What was the car, their co-driver, their team manager. And one of the questions came up that moderator Henry Hope Frost asked was, if you had to have a female co-driver, team member, who would you choose? They asked Alan de Cadenet first, was Alan had actually run the 24 Hours of Le Mans with Desiree Wilson. And Alan said, I would Desiree Wilson all day long. And being the elder statesman of the group, they asked Sir Sterling, who would he ask? And without hesitation, he immediately said, Lyn St. James. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to a successful businesswoman, author, professional and Hall of Fame race car driver, speed record holder, mentor, and someone dedicated to the advancement and promotion of women in the motorsports industry, and a very fast lady, Miss Lyn St. James.
Who is that woman? When I've known Tim a long time, and when Tim made a former at a speaker series, and he introduced me before, and that last piece absolutely blew me away. I mean, it doesn't get any better than Sterling Moss, and when he said that, I was just stunned. And even though I've had all these other wonderful experiences, when those come out of the blue like that, you know, it's one of those big honors. And I want to thank Tim for inviting me back now at his new home here at the M1 Concourse, my first time here. I want to thank him also for giving you that history lesson, because people don't realize, and I didn't realize for sure, until later in my career, after I was completely, no longer racing, in fact, that I started doing some studying in the history of women in racing, and so many people would treat me, and I'm sure they treated Janet, and they treated Shirley like we were some, I don't know, like we came from outer space or something, and we were the first person to be doing this. And if you don't know your history, I learned this from Billie Jean King, if you don't know your history, you really don't have a future. And so it was great to be able to go back and learn myself about all of this, and with the help of the Henry Ford Museum, I actually created a traveling exhibit on the history of women in racing, starting from Camille Dugas all the way up to, at that point, I think it was Danica Patrick that was sort of the bookends during that time. So it's been quite a journey. I can't say I've loved every bit of it, but I certainly have respected my peers, I've respected my competitors, and I've respected how hard it is to accomplish anything in this sport. I don't care. The car doesn't know the difference. You know, it doesn't say, oh, I got a gal driving it, and so I'm not going to give it all my horsepower. I call a gender-neutral sport because the car doesn't know the difference. And it's a people sport, even though it's all about cars and it's all about horsepower and it's all about handling and it's all about tires, it's about grip, and it's about all these wonderful, you know, technical things. In reality, it is really about people. And if you can't integrate yourself successfully in an industry or a sport, because it is a people sport, then you really have no chance for success. And that's one of the things I love about the sport, is the fact that it is a fully integrated sport. I think our sport doesn't do a good enough job of sort of telling people about that. In today's world about, you know, diversity and inclusion and equity, we've been living it. I mean, we don't have the numbers maybe, but at the same time, there are so many women successful in this industry that to me it's a sales tool, or it's a story that isn't being told well enough, that we really represent what society is trying to do in business and other areas. So, but I want to back up a little bit, because I do get the question, how did you get started? And Tim mentioned it. I went to the 24 hours. I grew up in Ohio, not too far from here, and I really had only seen drag racing, and I'd seen what I guess would be called, like at the Painesville Speedway or something, you know, there were these fairgrounds that they would have these races, and it was dirty and kind of strange and didn't really relate to me. Did a little drag racing, liked that. In fact, I won in my buddy's GTO. I won my very first drag race, and I came home and showed Mom my trophy, and she was not happy at all about that. It's not what I sent you to girls' school and gave you piano lessons, and this is not what I have planned for you. So that kind of came to a screeching halt. Plus, I kind of got tired of it. In drag racing, you have to wait a long time. You go down, and it's like 6, 7, 8, 10 seconds, it's over, and then you get in line again if you're lucky enough and you win, like I did. But then you go to the back of the line, and then you just wait. So it was kind of didn't relate to me so well. So, but I did like to drive fast, and I found that is a very important element if you're going to try to be a race car driver. But, and I figured I better find a safe, legal place to do that, which was on a racetrack. But I didn't know where or how, and didn't really pursue anything. And then I moved to Florida, and I went to the 24 Hours of Daytona for the first time. And I'm like, this is the first time I ever saw road racing. I didn't know there was a racetrack in Mid-Ohio. I didn't know, about this at all until I was down there in Daytona, and I saw, all of these amazing cars. It was like in 1973, so it was like when, Mario Andretti was there and Pedro Rodriguez and all the exotic cars. But sort of towards the back of the field were the Porsches and Camaros and Corvettes and what I call real people. And the fact that you could actually, in the paddock, you could just wander and you could see drivers and crews and wander up and down pit lane during the race, watch everybody working so hard. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a real thing, it's not the superstar stuff. And I sat outside turn 1 in this grandstands with my blanket and my cooler, and stayed all night, and my husband, who was with me, said, can we go back to the hotel? And I'm like, no, I see these brakes glowing at night. I mean, this was like the most exciting thing I'd ever seen. So that was what opened my eyes to road racing, and then became a member of the SCCA. I remember trying to find some kind of a car club, and we'd go to the Yellow Pages. Most of you in this room are old enough to remember when we had to go to the Yellow Pages to find things. And finally found the Florida region of SCCA, went out to Moroso Motorsports Park, which unfortunately it was then called Palm Beach International Raceway, which I just have read recently is being closed. But, and I became a member of the club, and then of course they ask you immediately to volunteer. And so it was like, so I tried working on a corner one weekend, and I'm like, that's not so good for me. I tried timing and scoring, and I'm like, I want to be outdoors, and I want to be moving. I can't just sit there and do timing and scoring. And truly, the driving is what I like the most. So I found out that you had to go to driver's school to get a competition license. And in searching that information, I was told that you can rent a car, you can rent somebody's car to go to driver's school, but you have to really be careful because a lot of those cars they break down, and then you don't complete the school because the car didn't run enough. And so the best way is if you have your own car. Well, I couldn't afford a race car and a street car. Well, I was fortunate, and timing is so much about everything in your life and in this world, is that they just in 1973, and I think that 1974 was the first competition year, for a new class in SCCA called showroom stock, where you go out to your showroom, to the car dealer, buy a car. It had to be less than 3 years old, and you put a roll bar in it and a 5-point seatbelt and a 5-pound fire extinguisher, and you go racing. And so you couldn't modify the car, you couldn't change the engine, you couldn't tweak it. And so I went out and bought a Ford Pinto, which was my first race car. It was eligible. It was the cheapest eligible car then, and put the 5-point seatbelt in it and the 5-pound fire extinguisher, which was required for all of them, remember, but not just Pintos, if you remember the story about the Pinto. And went to driver's school, and so that was the beginning. And as Tim referenced, I go through my 2 schools. I did have trouble. The first school, the instructor wouldn't talk to me. We had like 4 students with this volunteer instructor, and he just was like, I was invisible. And I'm like, I'm one of these, you got to talk to me. And I was like, so I was complaining to my husband, and he goes, well, just go to the chief instructor and ask for another instructor. Duh. So I did, and I got this Italian guy that had this Alfa. And I mean, he was so dynamic. He rode with me in the car. Then he rode with me. Then I rode with him. And I mean, he was like, doing corners on the dirt, in the sand there, trying to show me what the line was. I mean, he was so engaged, and I learned so much. And so that was a great lesson there, was to just ask for what you need if things aren't right. And so anyway, I got my competition license, and then the second weekend, the very first race, you have your very first race as part of your completion of your driver's school. And so I was doing really well, and I was hitting all my marks in the corners, everything is reference points. Was failing to watch my mirrors as well as I should have, and the overall leader was, of course, they put 10 classes in one race. The overall leader came around to pass me, and it caught me off guard, and I lost control of the car and was spinning in turn 3 at Moroso, which there's a lot of water around Moroso because it's really in the middle of a swamp. And I spun, lost control, and I ended up in the water, which I thought was just like a pond. Fortunately, the car had stopped spinning just as I hit the water, and I got to get out of here, so I opened the door and got out. The corner worker said it looked like I walked on water. And then I turned around. By the time I got to the shore, I turned around, and I watched my Pinto, full-bodied, and it happens to be my street car, by the way. I watched my Pinto go blub, blub, blub. The car disappeared. And I'm standing there, and I remember thinking, God, if Scotty could just beam me out of here. It was like the evidence was gone. I'm just standing there with my race suit on and a helmet in the middle of the racetrack. Cars are going around, they got a local yellow, and my car disappeared. It was very strange. And so, the races went on. I got back to after that race was over, I got back to the paddock, and it was a really weird feeling. And at the end of the day, the entertainment of the Saturday night beer party was to go down and watch the divers pull the Pinto out. And so everybody's down there, and I got a short and t-shirts on like everybody else, and I'm drinking a beer and watching, and I remember the guy standing next to me goes, "So who's driving that car?" He said, "I don't know." I did not have to own up to it at that point. So the challenge was obviously the car was soaked in very, old water, and we had to flat tow the car home, and then we had to dry it out because I had to use it for my street car. And so I remember we had to put the windshield washer motor in the oven at like 125 to get it dried out, and the seats, everything smelled. I mean, it was just, and because I ordered the car, and I lived in South Florida, I ordered it with no air conditioning because I knew that would take horsepower and weight. And so literally for months, I would turn the fan on because that was the only way of getting any kind of air through the car, and seaweed would come out of the vents. So I had constant reminders of this failure. So, it was a test. I mean, it was like, and I remember my husband then telling me, he said, because I said, maybe I'm not cut out for this. I want to do it so bad, and it's so much fun, but maybe I can't. I mean, this was obviously not a great way to start. He said, it's just how bad you want it. How bad do you want it? How hard are you willing to work? And so I had a lot of, with racing, it's hard. Like other sports, you can go, the next weekend you can go play tennis again, right? The next day you can go hit golf balls again. But there's weeks and sometimes months in between your opportunity to get back on the track. So I had a lot of time to think about that. And, but I dug down and fortunately decided, I got to figure this out. I have got to figure this out. And then went on to compete in the Pinto, and as Tim said, I ended up winning the Florida Regional Championship. At the end of that year, though, I didn't win the championship that year. They did give me a trophy. It had an alligator on top of it. So I had constant reminders of this failure. And yeah, by then I did laugh about it, but it was devastating. So, and then I went on to get a Cosworth Vega because showroom stock, they divided it into A, B, C, and the Pinto was in the C, and I wanted to be in the A. And here we go. You always want to go faster. You always want a faster car, and that was the start, and that was the platform or the foundation of when I started to realize that this is me. This is who I am, which I still argue with one of my personal coaches, that it isn't who you are, it's what you do. I said, no, you don't understand. It really is who I am. But what it is that it gave me this gift of power, of confidence, and a power of testing yourself all the time. We always look for things to do to ratify our existence, that we're good at something, that we excel at something, and we look for awards or trophies or recognition or promotions at work, or I don't know, those are all those validations, right, for our existence. The thing about racing is that every corner of every lap, you get that opportunity. And it takes you a while to realize that it's really for you. Nobody's really watching every corner, and then there's that beautiful thing called the stopwatch that is your result, and then there's that next session or that next race where you went quicker. And so you have this constant struggle and challenge and test, but you get this constant validation. And so, but it took a long time, though, to realize that my validation for existence was not the stopwatch totally. It wasn't the result, but it was that sense of all the other lessons that I learned, and I'm going to share those with you. I'm a very constant learner, very ambitious, hungry person for knowledge. And so I read a lot of books, and I read a lot of self-help books, and those are great. I mean, you get little fragments of help along the way. But I realized every time I would learn something in those books, and then I thought, well, I learned that in racing. I mean, racing has given me every life lesson. And the first is to believe in yourself. There's nothing like strapping yourself in a race car, because at that moment, you're alone. I mean, it takes a community to put the car on the track. I don't care if they're friends, crews, whatever. I mean, you can't do it all by yourself, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so hard for women. I mean, a bunch of guys hanging out, having a beer. Hey, let's go racing. Joe, you're really good. Kip, you're a really good driver. And you got 2 or 3, 4 guys that'll just say, yeah, we'll go with you. And the next thing you know, you put a car on a racetrack. if you're a gal and you're going to lunch with a bunch of women, the likelihood of that situation happening is pretty next to nil, right? And if you happen to be a gal who's having lunch with the guys, they aren't likely to say, hey, Lyn, you know, you want to drive? You know, you're fast. You know, we see you got a lot of speeding tickets, so, you know, you can drive. Or, I mean, the best it might be is, which is how I started, which is I make really good sandwiches. And so I was really part of the crew, you know. But so it's really hard for women to integrate, I think, particularly at the very beginning. But it takes all these people, or it also takes the challenge of yourself. My dog got killed at the racetrack, at the same track, Palm Beach, and I was devastated. I mean, I could not stop crying. I mean, I just could not stop crying. And that happened on the Saturday night, and then Sunday morning we had races. And I remember my husband, he said, he took his Corvette, and I'm going. And I said, I can't believe Max is gone. And I was crying, it was a mess. He said, Lyn, you know, you're earning points. This is the championship. You know, that wasn't the championship race, but it's in the season. And so I had to deal with that. And finally I said, okay. And I'm sitting on the grid in the race car crying, because I'm still crying, sobbing. And then I go out on the warm-up, you know, when you go out on the opening lap. By the time that green flag fell, I was a race car driver. I cleared it. And that's when I started to understand who's in control of your brain. Who is in control of your brain? You are, you know? And so it was like, I let go of that sadness and that grief and was a race car driver and then when the race was over, I don't even remember how I finished, it didn't matter. When that race was over, I was back to being someone who lost their dog, you know what I mean? I started crying, I cried for days after that. So that was a great lesson, me understanding this power that you really have if you really applied this concentration and this mind control. And then this believe in yourself. I'm trying to think when it was fairly recent when I had an opportunity to drive a car I'd never driven before. I remember exactly when it was, and I'm going to share this later when I talk to him about my favorite cars, so I won't tell you what kind it was. But I was sitting in this race car that I'd never driven, and I hadn't been in a race car in about 7 years. This was after I was done. Here, you know, I did all this stuff that he said I did, right? I've been in Indy, I did da-da-da-da-da. But I've been out of the cockpit for like 6, 7 years, and now I'm sitting in a race car. I'm like, holy shit, you know. I mean, lots of doubt started coming in, and I took a hold of myself. I said, Lyn, you can do this. You know how to do this. I mean, so there had to be this transition, you know, so you have to believe in yourself. You can't call up somebody and say, I need help right now. You know, it has to come from within you. So this whole thing about believing in yourself and having, to me, racing, if you can't find that, then you can't be successful in racing. And then there is that whole thing, though, that you can't do it alone. So you have this strength you have to have in your own, and then you have to have this ability to put a team together of people to help you and to work with them. Well, you know, people are interesting because they're all unique and different in their own way. And then there's the hierarchy of a team. If it's all your buddies, I'm not saying it's easier, but you kind of know your buddies usually. But when I got to the professional level, and a lot of you bought my book, and there's some stories in there about some of the teams that I ran for, one of them being rather local, who you will learn about, that it didn't always go so well. If the culture of the team is not conducive to what that athlete needs, it's a struggle. So, and because I was absolutely blessed to have Ford Motor Company as a sponsor, let me tell you, without Ford Motor Company as a sponsor that I got in 1981, I would have never had a career, I know that. And so that was this huge opportunity, this huge blessing. But then you now are part of a professional team. It's no longer you and your husband and your buds going racing. It's a professional team. And you have to integrate yourself, but you also have to figure out how do you bring the best out of these people that are assigned to you. And then realize that they don't work for you. You're not employed, you don't employ them. They have a boss, they have a team manager, the team manager then has a team owner. So there's this whole hierarchy of business of which exists within a race team, and you're really nothing more than just a piece of that. You think you're important, you think you're the most important, but the reality is you really aren't. you are evaluated based on your results, but you're also the most vulnerable. Because you don't get the job done, there's going to be somebody they believe will get the job done, and you're out and they're in. So you're fighting for survival, literally, for your job every race, but there's this whole team thing that just really, and fortunately, I'm a people person, and I love to get to know people, whether they're on my crew or not. And so it has been a life lesson in my professional racing, well, in my racing, professional or amateur, is to be blessed to get to know so many wonderful people and so many assholes. I mean, because I learned they're there too, you know. But I've had to deal with them even, you know, and so you learn about how to manage your life with people, and I've been blessed to have some rich friends. I mean, I just talked. Pete Halsmer was going to come today, and he was one of my teammates, and you know, just a super great guy. Pete gave me one of the best pieces of advice I could have ever had at Indy in 1992, my rookie year. I'm at the Indianapolis 500 for the whole month of May as a rookie and living an absolute Christmas every day experience, but you know, a lot of challenges on the track. And I left the garage obviously for a while, came back in, and the guy said, "Hey, somebody was here and left you a note." So I go over to the bulletin board, and it said, "Dear Lyn, believe your butt, love Pete." And that was literally the best piece of advice I could have had, because, you know, at Indy, you know how the cars were there for, well, they're not here the whole month now, but you're out there for days, right? I mean, most races, you got 2 practice sessions, you got a qualifying session, and then you go racing, right? I mean, that's a traditional schedule. At Indy, you're there the whole month, or 2 or 3 weeks, and you go out there every day. Well, what the heck are we doing? Well, you know, we are trying to figure out the setup of the car under all different conditions, but it isn't like, it costs a lot of money. Every lap is thousands and thousands of dollars, and so every mile. So you don't just go out there for grins, you know, but as a rookie, obviously you try to get as much seat time as you can. And what I learned by Believe Your Butt is if the car's not right, you come in. So when you see these cars constantly coming in during a practice session, it's because something ain't right. And where in most racing, if things aren't right, you adjust. You work around it. You drive around it because you have to. Well, if you drive around it in Indianapolis at speeds of over 200 miles an hour, those are the ones that are in the wall, because you can't drive around it. You can't force the car to do something because you know it's the right thing for it to do. And so Believe Your Butt was a beautiful piece of advice. So teamwork and team cultures, and I mean, that is so underrated. I mean, the Jeff Gordon Everham relationship, if you watch in NASCAR, I mean, that was magic, you know, and Jimmy Johnson had it with the guy whose name right now I can't think of, but those are such unique situations because they communicate. They really had something going. It's like a great marriage, and if it doesn't exist, you know, if that falls apart, you know, you don't forget to drive. You don't forget how to race. You don't forget how to set a car up. You don't forget how to engineer a car. You don't forget how to have the strategy. It's just because you guys aren't connected. They aren't connected. We aren't talking. We aren't there on the same page. So that human dynamic is a piece that I think, again, is not talked about enough. So the other life lesson is learning to deal with failure. Well, I got that right out of the box. In that water was the Pinto. So, but I've had, you know, with the successes, there's been some really significant failures. If you go to YouTube and you put my name in and you put crashes with that, you'll see a horrific crash at Riverside that I had in 1986 that fortunately all 3 of us walked away from, Doc Bundy, myself, and Chip Robinson. That was a failure. Fortunately, it wasn't that I made a mistake, but it's just a case that it was still a very, very dynamic, one of the most horrific crashes at Riverside, you know, so that's a failure in your career that I thought would be career ending and actually had the opposite effect. But I've had those crashes. I've had those, you know, those where I got bumped at Indy for 2 years, where I didn't make the field at Detroit, at Belle Isle, in an IndyCar. You know, those are gut-wrenching, but it's those failures that you learn the most from. I had a horrific crash testing at Phoenix in 1995. It's 5 or 6, darn it. It gets cloudy sometimes on these years. And I was it must have been 96, yep. And we were testing, and Buddy Lazier and I were both going through turn 1 at Phoenix. Just a test day, no problem here. We're 2 of us going through side by side. Unbeknownst to both of us, the end plate of his rear wing came off, and so he lost grip. And he literally spins right in front of me. I T-bone him. We both go into the wall. He bursts into flame. And we punched a hole in the wall, moved it back. I mean, it kind of stopped till like for hours before they could get the track ready again. Fortunately, I destroyed the car, but I was okay. Buddy broke his back in 15 places. So he's taken to the hospital. I've known Buddy for a long time. I know the family. I'm like, God, it wasn't neither one of us, it wasn't our fault, but this stuff happens. And so I went on to race another car, got a backup car, whatever. But Buddy, this was in March of that year. Buddy breaks his back in 15 places. He's in the hospital. He's going to recover. But May of that, but Buddy's a really tall guy, so he's pretty tall and slender. So he didn't even have a poured seat. He literally was sitting in the cockpit itself, right? He just didn't have a seat because he didn't have enough room. And so that's why he broke his back in 15 places, because all of the impact literally was absorbed by his spine. And so that's in March. In May of the same year, Buddy shows up at Indy, and he won the Indy 500. Now, he had a seat. He figured out how to have foam to build him support. He was also under medication, which was evidently okay at that time. I'm not going down that one. But he won the race. And he learned how to figure out how to get a seat poured so that he had the right support. So we learn from these failures. And if you don't learn from them and you don't figure out, there's always these debriefs. And so, you just learn. And then you learn how to sometimes just suck it up and move on. And then, of course, the results. If you don't get results, you don't have a career, and so you have to really, you can't force them. You can't force yourself to win a race. And I think 3 results that I had that I didn't plan, 1 I didn't plan, 2 I did. I was really not winning as many races as I wanted. I had 1-year contracts with Ford, so I knew I was being evaluated every year to have a deal next year. And so when I was this is 85, and I was in the Ford Mustang, and for some reason, my co-driver that I started the season with was Bruce Jenner, who was kind of a part-time driver. In other words, he wasn't like, Scott Pruitt, or we weren't full-time. He was like, he would not make all the races, and so I had sometimes a variety of co-drivers within the team. And so I was getting tired of this because I was being shuffled from one co-driver to another in these endurance races. And I had my first pro win at Road America with Johnny Jones as my co-driver. It was great, so I'm on them. Yeah, I got my first pro win for Ford, 1985. My next race was at Watkins Glen. And so they brought in another co-driver, in this case Whitney Gantz, who I knew well, but Whitney was an open wheel guy. And he was not comfortable in the car. I mean, I could just see he was not comfortable in the car. But I thought, we'll be fine. I start the race. I'm in the zone. I'm just like in the zone. We come in for the pit stop to do driver change, fuel, tires, and driver change. I have no idea where this came from because I did not plan it. I pull in. I didn't loosen my belts. I didn't put the window net down. And I sat there staring at the team manager going, they do the tires and fuel. This is not a time that we have a conversation. They did Whitney's standing there trying to get the window net down, which you have to do from the inside. And I wasn't releasing it, and it took off. I always carried $20 in my pocket because I always figured if I got stuck, I might have to take a cab back to the hotel. But I said to myself, afterward, I was like, I don't know what you just did, but just keep going. And again, I was in the zone. Well, I ended up winning the race, and that's why I'm in the history books. And by the way, it's not the only woman. It's the only professional driver that's won an endurance race driving solo. So I didn't let the co-driver in, and because of that, I'm now in this history books on this one little isolated moment. And I didn't know, but I do know that sort of was one of these check the box of, gee, she's good, because when you're a co-driver in an endurance race, unless somebody literally is keeping track of every lap, you don't know whether that was your win or whether that was Scott Pruitt as a co-driver or Tom Gloy as my co-driver, who was really the winner. In this case, it was clearly me. And the other two, you want me to move on, I think, because you're standing over there. The other two are, that I did actually strategize, was to go to the Talladega and set these record runs. Because I said, first seeing that there was a women's close quarters record at 187 miles an hour that Janet Guthrie set at qualifying at Talladega. And then the men's record was like 230 miles an hour. And I'm like, I wish they wouldn't print that. It makes it look like we can't go as fast as the guys, and that's ridiculous. So I convinced Ford to take the Ford Probe to Talladega, because that was their best race car at the time. And we went 2:01, not great, but at least better. And that's how I also convinced Ford that I could race the Probe, and I got to race the Probe the next year. Well, then I could see that Ford was actually moving more towards stock car racing as we got further into the 80s. So I convinced Bill Elliott and Goodyear and Ford to build a stock car, a Ford Thunderbird Super Coupe, to go break the record we already had, and we did. That's when I went 2:12. So those were like strategic results where I could control the result. Can't control the race, but when you go to a speed record, you're there all by yourself. You better get it done. But you get the team together, and everybody has a goal, and you set the goal. And so you got to get the results, and then you got to tell everybody that you did it, because sometimes you forget about that. You tell people what you're going to do, and then you go do it. We got to make sure you told everybody what you did, because sometimes they move on to the next thing, and they didn't even know you did it. So those were sort of my life lessons, and the last one was to help others. I realized over the decades, and particularly when I got to Indy, I got so much fan mail. I had never, ever experienced that. And people wanted advice. They didn't just, I said, I can't just send them an autograph just because they sent me a note, but they want a career advice, or they want to know how to get into racing. And that's what inspired me to create my driver development program. And a lot of that came from the work that I learned, because one of my sheroes was Billie Jean King, and I got to meet her in the 80s. And if you've been 3 minutes with Billie Jean King and you're not convinced that you have to go out and change the world, then you're kind of blind and deaf and dumb, because she's just, whoa, And that's what I decided. I really had to try to find a way to make a difference in motorsports, and particularly to help grow the sport with women as not only drivers, but in other areas. So those were kind of, which now I'm doing with another organization, and there's cards here about women in motorsports North America. So this is kind of a new mission that I'm on, even though it's late in my career. So I think Tim wants to come up and ask me some questions, and I want to share some pictures and some stories about that. But I've been blessed to have this amazing career and this amazing life, and to me, racing is who I am. So thank you for listening.
For those of you who may not be familiar, what we do now is we've got some prepared questions that we send our speakers, and then after that we open it up to the floor. So if any of you got questions at that time, just put your hand up, and I'll make my way over to you with a microphone. So, Lyn, what are your top 5 favorite race cars of all time?
Well, you're going to get more than 5. I can't just narrow it down to 5. So, oops. Well, this is when I was racing SCCA in the Pinto and the Cosworth Vega, I would see Formula Atlantic cars, and I'm like, oh God, I want to race one of those. Those are so cool. Well, in 2013, I actually got to race a Formula Atlantic car for the first time. I was like, well, it just took a few years, And so this is a Chevron B39 so my vintage racing has really opened up my life to really cool race cars. I mean, seriously, really cool race cars that are a lot more fun to drive than the beasts. Those Trans Am cars and GTO cars in the 80s, they're like beasts. Those cars are heavy, and they got a lot of power, and they don't have any brakes, and I mean, you're just constantly, where you get in a car like this, the balance was just fabulous. And so I actually won, this is at Thunder Hill, I won a Formula, I mean, it was all Formula cars, it wasn't, I was on, and so this is the balance of power, downforce, grip, and everything was beautiful. So that's one, my Chevron B39. Oops. Go forward. Which one do I hit? Okay, that's another one of that. Isn't that cool? I just love that car. It's the same one. Okay, also got to race another Formula car at Laguna. So this was another one of these sweet, again, I just love this category, or this sort of balance of the car. That belonged to Bert Skidmore, and I got to race that one. That was another one. Okay. Then I got to race this Lotus. And I do realize I like small cars. Maybe that's why I started in the Pinto, but I just kind of like small cars. And so this was also at Laguna, and I've been fortunate to be invited by, some really good guys. What do I? The big one, yeah. Okay, the big green one, okay. So anyway, and I got the Rolex. I didn't know at the Monterey, this was at the Monterey Historics, that every race they give you a Rolex trophy for the drive of the race. It has nothing to do with how you finish. Well, it should have something to do with how you finish, but and I got it for this. So it's a special moment that in this B30, in this Lotus that I got to. So I loved that car. And then I got to race this Bugatti again at the Historics. I had to learn. I mean, the shifter is outside the cockpit. I mean, I got to go to Colorado to learn how to drive these. I mean, this is like, and you keep thinking this is going to be like a beast, right? It's just sweet. I mean, it worked, it handled, it turned, it braked. I mean, everything worked. But boy, it was really hard to learn how to drive it and shift it. So I did it in the hills in Colorado, where the car was based. And also this, oh my God, just went out of my, Lancia, thank you. 24, it's a Lancia 24. I raced that at the Historics as well for Peter Giddings. And I also got to race the Talbot Lago that he had, and it was just another sweet, sweet car. Oh, that one's again back. Then, Goodwood. I'm racing a Goodwood and a Cobra in the Tourist Trophy, I think with Desiree that year. And Clive Chapman comes up and said, how would you like to drive the car that Emerson Fittipaldi sat, I think it was Emerson Fittipaldi, sat on the pole and won a race at Watkins Glen in the Lotus Gold Leaf Special. I'm like, are you serious? And so I got to drive that. It was an exhibition race for Cosworths. And I was so worried that my butt was going to be too big. I sat in the car and I just fit in it. And I mean, I was like on cloud nine this whole time. And then they happened to tell me as we're getting ready to get on the pre-grid, we're on the pre-grid getting ready to get on the grid, the starter doesn't work, so we're going to have to push start you. And I'm like, okay, fine, you'll start at the back, and no, you're on the front row. And so literally sitting in that car, you can see I'm looking in the mirrors. I felt like I was in the movie Grand Prix. I mean, all these, Formula One cars are behind me. And Jackie Ickx was driving the pace car in the Ford GT at that particular time. And so I shared that with Jackie when we were at last week. So that was and the car again, it's just, these cars are designed to do what they are supposed to do. When you take a production-based car and you try to turn it into a race car, which is what the GT and of course Trans Am's now they're purpose-built, but so that was a favorite car and experience. And my all-time favorite, just overall really, is the Ford GT. It's a GT3 that Kevin Doran built off the 2007, I think it is, chassis. But it had adjustable power steering. I said, the first race car I haven't had to wrestle with. And it had air conditioning, which I never found the dial to turn that on, and it had an adjustable seat. Now, when I say adjustable seat, it wasn't just that it went up and down in the rails. It had all of these, you could pump up the, the bolsters on the side, and so I didn't have to go have a custom seat made, and I could fit in the car. I was like, oh, I was in absolute heaven. And Kevin knows it, and he calls me every time he's going to run the car, and he said, you've always got a seat in this car. So I said, this will probably be the car when I turn my last laps in a race car. This is the car it's going to be. There's another picture of it. That was actually here it was at the Concourse of America. It was on display at the Concourse of America. And one of the reasons why I like vintage racing is I got to drink milk on the podium at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So I was in an Indy Lights car, co-driving with Bruce Hamilton, who's in the red suit, and I didn't know they did this. And so literally I am on the, on the podium at Indy drinking milk. I said, I know it's a vintage race, but still. And one of the absolute all-time is when I got to race at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in a Spice, Cosworth Spice chassis. That chassis, and there's another chassis I'll show you in a minute, but to not just be at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but when you talk about a car that works and a car that just fits me, it fits my driving style. It just did everything right. And I got to race with Gordon Spice and Ray Bellum. We were quick, and we were running in contention, and then the car broke 16 hours in. And that's the two-car team. And the Ford Probe. That was not one of my favorite cars, but I set records with it, and I had to bring it up because of that four-cylinder turbocharged engine. It had absolute amazing power, but the power band was about that wide. And so you literally, most of the time in the middle of a corner, you have to shift 3 times. I mean, you were so busy to keep that car in the power band. It was the hardest race car I've ever driven. But similarly, this is very similar to the Spice, but it's an Argo chassis. And it's the car that I ran in '84, and it was a very small team, and it had a Cosworth engine in it, and we had great success. John McLaughlin ran the team, and it's just that car again was custom design, not designed, but everything in the cockpit was designed to fit me, so it was not a lot of compromise. And we had great success with that car. I loved it. And that's another picture from Daytona with it. So Indy cars was the ultimate goal, and I wanted to share. No one's ever seen this photo, or at least I never gave it to any media. Dick Simon was the owner who gave me a chance to drive an Indy car. I bugged him for 3 years. I just want to drive an Indy car. I just want to drive an Indy car. And that's all I wanted to do is drive it. I wanted to see what the ultimate race car was like, to be in it and drive it. He gave me that chance at Memphis in 1988, 3 weeks after I set the records at Talladega. And I did so well that he said at the end of the day, and he let me run all day, which was amazing, he said, we can do this. He didn't say you can do this. He said we can do this. I'm like, oh, I got a team owner who says I can do this. It only took us 4 years until I got JCPenney as a sponsor to raise the kind of money it took to do it. But I was having trouble because I'd go to these companies and they say, so have you ever raced an Indy car? No. Have you ever raced any open wheel car? No. Have you ever raced at the Indy 500? No. I said, that's because I'm going to be a rookie. And they're like, how much money do you want? You know, it was kind of not the right answers for somebody that when you're asking them for $500,000. And so Dick said, oh, we'll fix that. So he took me to Indianapolis Motor Speedway when he was doing a Goodyear tire test. So that is the very first time that I got to drive an Indy car around Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It was Scotty Brayton's car, and it was scarier than hell at that point, but at the same time, it got my brain working that I could figure this out, and Dick was fabulous to work with. And of course, that's what it used to be like at Indy, where Dick had multiple cars, 5 or 6 cars, he'd line them up, and he took over opening day. And this was opening day at the Indianapolis 500. And that car is on my wall. It's my living room. So that's one of my personal favorites, not from a driving standpoint, but emotionally. You know, it's like your first love. Well, this was the first Indy car. This was from my rookie year at Indy. And I kept track of it. And this was before this, you know, car collectors and, you know, that people were buying these cars. So I kept track of this car and found out a number of years ago that it had been crashed and literally was getting ready to send to the crusher. And fortunately, I got it for nothing, which was cool. I just got the pieces. And then shortly thereafter, they put it together with aluminum, promising that I never would try to turn it into a race car, which I said was fine, but it still wasn't really complete. And then I met a gentleman who said, I'll restore that car for you. And so I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And so it's a beautiful piece of art in my living room. So that's my friend. And the unfinished business was I really want to set a record at Bonneville. And I got a chance to go to Bonneville in 2017. Didn't set a record, but I got my licensing done. The car actually ended up going upside down or spinning and landing on its all fours. But that is a streamliner that I got to take to the Bonneville Salt Flats. So that was the time I said, remember I said to you, I remember I was in a cockpit, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I don't know how to do this. And that's what I had to say to myself, Lyn, you know how to do this, you know, even though I'd never been to Bonneville. You have to dig to find that confidence. You can't go out there going, I wonder how this is going to feel, you know. And you mentioned Amelia, and that was one of the highlights of my entire life, was when Bill Warner had me as honoree. These were my heroes that I would go every year and see, and I still am not believing that this really happened. But to see the cars, this was not every one of them, but this was many of the cars I just showed you. The one way over on the right is the car that I raced and won the class at the 24 Hours of Nürburgring in 1979, which, I mean, it was just amazing to see how many people would show up and say, I didn't know you did that. Oh, I didn't know you did that. And to see all those cars together was just amazing.
So if we had to choose one.
Oh, shoot, I can't. Well, if I have to choose one, I got to tell you, based on my driving a car that I would love to race again and love and all that, it's got that GT40. I mean, the GT. Yeah, the Ford GT.
Okay, next question. Which race results do you most cherish, and which accomplishment do you wish you had achieved?
Well, obviously, I wished I'd achieved the Indy 500. I mean, a woman is going to win that race. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I mean, I was the second of the 9, but there are more out there. Really, the talent pool is getting better and better globally, and fortunately, that race is globally, you know, accessible and all of that. So, but I remember when my rookie year, I was standing watching practice out on the pit lane, and one of the officials, one of these old officials, and I were standing next to each other, and he said, he looked up to where the crowd, which was the practice day, it wasn't that big, but he looked out onto the grandstands, and he goes, you know, when a woman wins the Indy 500, this place is going to go crazy. And I looked at him and I said, you're right, and I want to be that woman, you know. So obviously that's the one that you know, it's gone. You know, I can't answer that. But my biggest achievement is that I'm standing here, you know, that I feel that the length of my career and all of the things that have happened to me since is the biggest achievement I could have ever, because I didn't even ever think I would achieve a lot of that, so.
Which team member or co-driver did you most enjoy driving with? And alternatively, which driver was your greatest adversary?
A team member, didn't have to be a co-driver, yeah. Well, Klaus Ludwig would be the team member. I mean, he just did not want me to succeed, and he would not tell me anything, you know, because he was racing that Ford Probe, and he could make that car sing. He was the only one that could make it sing, but he was not willing to share anything. I think Pete Halsmer was my best co-driver, because he was really, we were in this together.
If you could, which...
Oh, wait a minute, Bill Elliott. Oh. Bill Elliott, though, I got to put Bill, wait a minute, Bill was so much fun, and he's so naturally quick, and so humble, and so like, I mean, he's just he would be the ultimate co-driver that I had. Sorry, Pete was great. Don't tell Pete I blew him out.
So obviously he's definitely awesome Bill in your world then.
Yeah, he's awesome, Bill. I mean, he really is. Yeah, hey, Lyn, how we doing? Yeah, I don't know. He was just so cool to be around.
If you could, which automotive personality from history would you like to meet, whether over lunch or to go to a drive with?
You know, I knew that question was coming. Why in the hell didn't I prepare that? Because I saw your notes. I think Kay Petrie, you know, Helene Nice, I'm sorry, Helene Nice, the Bugatti Queen. That story is so amazing, and I think that would be who I would pick.
And my last question, I think I know the answer, but it's based on the photographs that you shared with us. What is your most cherished automotive artifact?
Yeah, well, it's that baby it's my friend on the wall. Yeah. No, that is, you know, it's. I was a little worried that it was going to overpower the room and blah blah blah, but you know, it actually, it's just, I love it. I mean, I love walking into my living room and seeing it. So, yeah.
And when you walk in there, it does overpower the room. No.
Oh no, I don't
walk in
think.
and you're like, that's neat.
Well, you know, I got that, and I've got my baby grand piano, which, by the way, if you come, anybody that knows me really, really well always asks, where's the baby grand? And I said, it's in my living room. And they go, okay. Because when I won the 24 Hours of Daytona, the drivers don't get the trophies. The team owner gets the trophies. And so I didn't have a trophy. I mean, I come home from winning the 24 Hours of Daytona, and I got nothing to show for it. And so I thought, I need something. And long story short, I've always wanted a baby grand piano. I took 13 years of piano lessons, taught piano, by the way, for 6 weeks and got fired. So it's a good thing to know what you're not good at. But I love the piano, and I wanted a baby grand. So my baby grand piano is my trophy for winning the 24 Hours of Daytona, and it sits with my car. So it's really an automotive artifact, even though it's not a car.
Questions from the floor, anybody?
Thank you for coming to Michigan. It's an honor to see you. I just wondered, I hate to bring up a negative question, but did you experience any prejudice either on or off the course from the male drivers? Is that anything that you experienced?
Well, early on, the first one was when I was racing the Cosworth Vega at this point. So I was really early in my racing life. I hate to call it a career. And a guy that had a Saab, he protested me for giving him the finger. Now, I was taught that you had to point somebody by, right? And he was in an SSB, you know, and I got all wound up I had to get witnesses, so I had to go to the corner that he said he did it, I did it at, and all that. I mean, it was such a huge distraction, and I thought this is going to go on my records, you know, and all that. And my husband he said, Lyn, this is nothing more than a distraction so that you're not getting ready for the next race. Get over it, just let it go, you know. So, I mean, I would think that was discrimination in the sense that the only reason that guy was bugged was because I was quicker than he was. Ultimately, I still ended up beating him, but and that was an eye-opener to be prepared for some stuff that I didn't expect to happen. But really, I didn't have any horror stories. I mean, I'm sure they probably maybe more happened than I can remember because we have a tendency to forget the bad stuff. But I tended to be very low-key. You know, I didn't wear the girl hat and so I think that the worst is that most people, even some of my co-drivers, would be more apt to ignore me than to hang out and all that. But in most cases, I didn't miss that either because I didn't want to do the stuff they were doing. So, you know, so really, I can't tell you any really horror stories. The worst was, not the worst, but the one I remember was that idiot. Thank God, I thought you were going to have Roy give him the thing. I was like, jeez.
Lyn, again, thank you for being here in Michigan. We thank you both for making the journey. So, Bruce Jenner's your co-driver. I think there's more to that story that might be interesting to hear about.
About Bruce Jenner?
Bruce Jenner, yes.
Well, it really isn't. No, it's weird. The only thing I can say is that Bruce, to me, was not comfortable in his own skin, never knowing that maybe this was why. But I mean, he just was awkward. I thought it's because he was a part-time racer and he would come in and he wasn't really integrated. You know, we were there every race. I mean, the guys and us that were there that were part of the Ford team were there every race. Bruce would show up and then he wouldn't be there for 2 or 3 races. So he never really felt, and I was pissed at him because at Charlotte, which we were co-drivers at Charlotte, which was earlier in the season, and I put the car in the lead. We do the driver change during yellow, perfect time. He goes back out and then crashes in the first corner of the first lap. And David Hobbs was doing TV commentary, which I didn't know this till much later. And David's comment on the TV was, that's what happens when you send a man to do a woman's work. Typical David, right? But of course, now David even gets more play out of that when he tells that story because of what's happened, you know. So, but really, you know, and Bruce, I mean, I haven't talked to him, and he's still Bruce in my brain, I'm sorry, you know, but I haven't talked to him in ages, so there's not a lot there more.
I thought of a distinction that I haven't heard mentioned. I met Lyn at the Ford Test Track because she would come and do a hot laps at the end of the vehicle dynamics course with a race driver. And but Lyn was, we saw her a lot because the basic race drivers we had were the people that Ford had on salary for more than just, you know, races. So it was Lyn and Jackie Stewart. So that's why we got you, and they wouldn't go pay somebody else, even if they were a Ford race driver, that didn't have the contract that you and Jackie had, that type of contract.
Well, that's true. I put my business hat on, to be honest. The first year that I had Ford in 1981, I only had a contract of sponsorship to race in the IMSA Kelly American Challenge. And first of all, it wasn't enough money to do it, which there's never enough money in the sponsorship deals to really finish or do everything the way you want to do it. So I would be making personal appearances at Ford dealers. I'd go in early and I'd be doing all this stuff. And somebody noted that, actually it was Rod Campbell before he really even started his company. And so we put our brains together and I created a whole separate contract to make personal appearances. And then I found out what they were doing with Jackie and I thought, okay, I'm gonna get a contract like Jackie has. Now mine didn't have as many zeros on it, but it was still making personal appearances and test driving cars. And I mean, I learned more in those 14 years. I had Ford as a sponsor on 1-year contracts for 14 years. And I only had racing contracts from them for 10 of those, but the last 4 was just personal service. And I learned more about the automotive industry during that time frame because I got to test drive cars, I got to work with engineers, I got to go to the design center, I got to go to factories and, you know, assembly plants, I got to meet executives. I mean, it was a deep dive education of the automotive industry. So I feel blessed that I had that. Not only that, I mean, I started out, and I can tell you, but they were very low 3-figure per day fees the first year. And I worked my way up because of I think I had definitely gave them value where I was at least in, you know, a little bit more mid-range, higher 4-figure fees. So, you know, I as a business person, I approached it, as I said, never to the level of Jackie, but I used Jackie as my model, you know, that you can contribute your knowledge and it's a win-win. You learn and you contribute your knowledge and other consumers, because I could tell them and their engineers what they couldn't tell each other because they would be worried about losing their job, you know, where I was just an outside contractor, so I could call it as it was. And people that know me know that I do that anyway, so thank you for sharing that. But it was a huge lesson for me.
Anybody else question?
Did your mother eventually change your mind about you racing?
No, when I won my first amateur SCCA race and came home and, you know, Mom, I won, I showed her the trophy. She goes, oh, great, doesn't mean you've got it out of your system now. I said, no, Mom. I said, it's only feeding the animal more. So once I started racing in IMSA, it was on TV where she could watch it, because she just worried. She was just a mom and she just worried. But once she could see it, of course, then she saw that crash at Riverside, and I called her from the emergency room to say, Mom, I'm okay. They got to check me out. I'm okay. And she didn't believe it, but she worried. That's it. She worried the whole time, but she was proud. I mean, she was proud, but she really, God, she said, can't you just forget this now and get on to doing something else? Yeah, so. But she taught me how to drive. I mean, she taught me that a car gives you warnings and signals, and so I remind her of that. I would remind her that, Mom, it's your fault. You're the one that taught me.
Hello, thank you for being here. Say, I have a question relative to technology, the new technology of battery-powered vehicles. How do you see that playing into the racing environment?
That's an excellent question that I think everybody's asking. I don't have an answer. I can tell you that I got to drive an electric vehicle for the first time last week or a couple weeks ago at the Hyundai Proving Grounds. I got to drive the EV6 GT Kia, and it was my first really all-electric vehicle that I got a chance to drive. So obviously they've got the power, that off the line they're really quick. They don't make any noise. I mean, I think there's issues that to try to put them in racing competition. I think right now the hybrid is the way they're going, but I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine watching. I have watched some Formula E races, and it's not terribly exciting. I haven't seen it live. I've only seen it on TV. But I just think we are at a state in technology to be challenged, because our sport has always been about testing and proving technology besides competition. We're still putting on and entertaining. So we have to be entertaining. We have to test and prove technology because the OEMs are still a major funder of motorsports. And so I'm glad that I'm not one to have to figure it out. I really don't have any answers right now. I don't know how we're going to be able to, but they've got to figure it out. Sorry.
A question you mentioned about the up-and-coming female drivers. Does any couple of them you want to sort of mention about that you think look promising?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's Courtney Crone, there's Sheena Monk, there's Hannah Grissom. There was a number of them out at VIR last weekend that I saw, some that I didn't know about. I think, globally, by being on the FIA Women in Motorsports Commission, was a recent victory at the WEC race in the 24-hour race where there were 3 females on a team. So it was a solid all-female, and they won overall. There's just globally, I mean, there's Bia, I mean, there's just Catherine Legg. I mean, there's just a lot. There's young ones coming up as well as the more mature ones, which we really need. Simona Di Silvestro. I mean, the drivers that are in their 20s and 30s that have got a good level of maturity as well as experience have really a good chance to have success. I mean, and to continue to have success. The hardest ones are the ones that are so young, because most cases their parents don't have the money. They don't understand it as a business, and so they don't have the pathway. I mean, that's one of my criticisms. I mean, we are creating in October 5th and 6th. We're having the first summit called Women with Drive about women in motorsports, where we're bringing the industry executives and leaders and presidents and to come in and talk about this, because if we don't create some kind of a pathway for these young drivers, male or female, to figure out. I mean, I was just talking to Kent last night, who's a young guy, 20-year-old, that is with the Dallara car that's here. It's a minefield out there for a young driver to try to figure out how do I. They think it's all about money. Money is an important ingredient, but there's no pathway of how to really get there. It's so fragmented and it's so complicated. I would hate to be an 18, 20, 17, 22-year-old because you're trying to figure it out, And so we need to create in my opinion, some form of a driver development pathway that is a feeder system to the talent. And but that doesn't happen. That doesn't exist right now.
I saw your post last week about Sheena Monk. And make a comment, she had a pretty serious incident in the Lamborghini series a couple of years ago at Laguna Seca. A really bad crash, and she was severely injured. But the following year when she came back, she didn't come back to race, but she came back to Laguna Seca and made a point of coming to the corner marshals or the safety teams meeting, which is usually at 6 or 6:30 in the morning before they go out on the track, to thank the people that got her out of that car. So that was a testament to her. It was one of those cases where, and her dad was a spectator up on the corkscrew. And the incident was so tragic, well, not tragic, I wouldn't say that, but her dad, sort of, it being a dad, climbed the fence, which you don't, as a track operator, you don't want to see a spectator climb the fence to get to his daughter because of the seriousness of the crash. But she did come down the next year and specifically thank all the course marshals for helping her out. So
That just gave me goosebumps. And she was on the podium at VIR, you know. So, and Hannah Zellers had a really bad crash upside down in the LMP3. So, yeah, that's why I talk about you learn more from failure, and if you come back from that, you do come back stronger. And I'm just hopeful that she and others will, you know, rise to where they are. And actually, it's okay. That's one thing when I'm mentoring them is the key is to win and then to beat the best. You know, it isn't always to get to the next level of the race. I mean, it's like with her winning, and I'm sorry to take all your time with this, but with her being on the podium in that Mustang in the Pilot Challenge race, it's like she shouldn't be, in my opinion, aspiring to be in the LMP, LMDH, or, you know, she should stay where she's at and try to win the championship. That will be the best testament of her success. And then if she has the talent and the wherewithal, they'll look at her to want to maybe put her in an LMP or a LMDH or GTP car. So, you know, sometimes we get too busy trying to move up instead of achieving the level of success we need to, where we're at.
okay. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause, Lyn St. James.
Thank you. And thank you. I love this guy. Okay, we're done? We're done.